Back in the early aughts, we saw a rise of a visual technology called the infographic. The infographic is a portmanteau of the two words information and graphic. What you want to imagine is vibrantly colored charts with elegant kerning on the text and little graphics to explain to your little pea brain how the entire world simply works in simple, easy to understand words that break down everything into easily consumable numbers. What happened here is that social media was going through a huge change. We were shifting from text-based social media to now visually enhanced social media. This is the time that we see Pinterest take off. This is the time we see Instagram become a real competitor to Facebook. And infographics rode this wave all the way up until the time where social video took over. Now that every brand and every designer is out there making engaging video content, perhaps just moving infographics, we don't see as many still long sheet infographics except for by die-hard designers and brands who are a little late to the game. Since we're looking back at this technology, we have the opportunity to enjoy all of the great infographics that happened, all of the kind of confusing and hard to understand infographics with just bizarre charts, like what does that dimension even mean? And more importantly, I want to talk about this pervasive misinfographic that pops up every couple of months in my feeds across all platforms like a groundhog. I don't know why it keeps getting passed around, and the creator has denounced the statistics and numbers passed along in the misinfographic. Yet here we are today, July 2021, and I'm once again presented with the surprising book facts misinfographic. Where's the beef here? Why am I so upset about this infographic? Why am I calling it a misinfographic? The infographic itself, you could tell it's an amateur effort, and that's not to knock the effort. At the same time, I was also dabbling in infographics both at school and in internships because I liked the visual style, I liked the trend, it was something I wanted to get into, and this is much more coherent and digestible than content that I was putting together. So nothing about the duochromatic colors, nothing about the text alignment. I do have some beef with the text alignment, but not enough to get really upset. It's just pretty much standard issues that somebody would have with trying to read something. My beef lies more so with the claims being made and the tone in which it's presented. So let's start in the first top left corner. 33% of high school graduates never read another book the rest of their lives. Besides being phrased kind of weirdly, it's making some claims that are very tall. 33% of high school graduates never read another book between high school graduation and being dead. Never is a very long time, and I'm curious to how they're qualifying a read. Is a read a chapter? Is a read cover to cover contents of a book? Or is it just the intended sections of a published bound selection of papers that is intended to be considered the book? So that's not the table of contents, that's not the foreword, that's not the thanks at the end of the book, the acknowledgments. It's just the meat, what the author sat down and wrote to be the content of the book. It's hard to tell, so what we can do is we can look up the actual source. It's kind of suspicious. All of the claims have one source, which is the Jenkins Group, Brian Tracy, including this quote at the bottom, which is, "Reading 1 hour per day in your chosen field will make you an international expert in 7 years." I'm pretty sure that is not going to be attributed to the Jenkins Group because I've heard that so much. That's a pretty ubiquitous phrase or concept that's persistent in culture. So I'm gonna go on a limb here and say that that is probably not creditable to the Jenkins Group as the original author, but let's do some research and try to figure out where these numbers are actually coming from. So we know that the Jenkins Group, Brian Tracy, are responsible as the source here. So let's see what we can find about them. We've got some scary statistics, and this person was blown away by it, so they wanted to share it, okay? We've got an imager thread where people talk about it and how mind-blowing the metrics are. And then you're not really finding very much specifically about the content. A lot of this stuff is really old. I'm surprised if any of it's still around. Okay, and it's not around. So what we do now is we can look at the author's page himself. His name is Robert Brewer, and his website is robertbrewer.org. So let's go ahead and pull that up. robertbrewer.org. Here is a January 4th, 2016 article about the surprising reading facts infographic. This is an updated update because the article continues to receive a lot of attention. And so he's trying to answer questions people have about the data presented in the infographic. An infographic I posted a while back has produced much interest. Several websites use the graphic on their own pages, which has caused large numbers of people to blow up my email wondering about my statistical sources. So here's what I've discovered about the source of the original graphic. It was from a Jenkins Group Facebook post in 2011, and the reading statistics are incorrectly attributed to the Jenkins Group. Robb made this infographic without actually reviewing the article or the study itself, which is why it's kind of phrased weirdly on the infographic that high school graduates never read another book again in their entire life, because he's not pulling from a primary source. He's pulling from a secondary source. Gerald Jenkins, owner and founder of the Jenkins Group, presented the observations to a group of small publishers using data from the Book Industry Study Group, American Booksellers Institute, and U.S. News and World Report. So on top of that, these figures are supposedly sourced from sources that have an invested stake in the publishing industry. It's not like this is a third party looking in at book consumption metrics. This is specifically marketing data. This is specifically about sales. It's not so much about consumption and studying it from an academic sense. So that's a lot of context. I think it's to say the stats from the original graphic are questionable, and I'm therefore recanting any and all connection to them. At the same time, I still believe in the absolute viability of reading and its ability to radically impact a person's life. So here's a new graphic. The stats aren't as juicy, but it still supports my original point. Reading is important. So then we get this less spicy version of the infographic. From this blog post, we can get a couple of facts. That Robb recognizes that this information that he presented was wrong, that he didn't cite it properly, and that the original source was not available for him to review, and he made the content and disseminated it anyways. We also get the information that Robb made this infographic because he loves books and loves reading, which I don't doubt. But it doesn't entirely match up with the story of making an infographic about how different groups of people never read again. It doesn't necessarily line up. Saying 33% of high school graduates never read a book again until they die doesn't really feed into the narrative, I love books and this is about the joys of books. If the message isn't, I love books, then what is the message of the surprising book facts infographic? What resonates with people that makes them want to share it? We can kind of read in the tone of the graphic based off of the negative statements versus the positive statements, what's being said here, and what the takeaway for people who share this graphic is. The more a child reads, the likelier they are able to understand the emotions of others. This statement is a positive statement in favor of reading. This supports the argument that reading is a good thing and that it advantages people. Then we have reading 1 hour per day in your chosen field will make you an international expert in 7 years. I disagree with the statement on its face. There's a big difference between having experience in a field and reading other people's experiences in a field, but that's neither here nor there. So this is a statement in support of reading. It helps you with your career and furthers your positioning in your field. That, coupled with the negative statements about people who've never read again, lends itself to the interpretation that readers are superior to non-readers. The reading between the lines of this infographic, and correct me if you think I'm wrong in the comments, is that readers are better than non-readers. People who enjoy reading in their leisure time are better than non-readers. It seems to me that the message of this infographic is not reading is a good thing that I like, and more so, reading is a morally good thing that makes you a better person objectively. And I disagree with that, which is why this infographic rubbed me the wrong way the first time I saw it. However, there are many people who recognize that as part of their own value system, that reading is very important to them, and when they read this, it's very juicy and they want to share it. What angle is Robb coming from where he thinks that reading makes you morally superior to non-readers? And for the record, I love to read. I have like 8 books checked out from the library right now. I read like 3 or 4 books a month, but that's because I prefer reading as entertainment to watching something. And it's fulfilling to me. I find it interesting. However, I do not think it is a moral good that makes a person a morally good person. And I don't necessarily see it as a requirement to advance experience in a field or a way to increase emotional intelligence. However, Robb seems to think it is, and that there's a good part of the population who reads for leisure that also agrees with the sentiment. And I would like to talk about where that's coming from my interpretation of Robb's blog and persona, where I think that unconscious bias or possibly conscious bias is coming from, and why it came across this way. Our good friend Robb Brewer is in fact an evangelical pastor. Why is this relevant? What does this have to do with the infographic? Well, he works at an evangelical university for pastoral studies, and I've recently gone down the rabbit hole of reading content by Christian influencers. In particular, there are 2 books that I've read. So Ginger and Jeremy Vullo's The Hope We Hold, and then Love Letter Life by Jeremy and Audrey Roloff of Little People Big World. These both are written by couples with kind of like a pastoral concept, right? Like Jeremy is a pastor, Ginger's pastor's wife. Both of the Roloffs believe that pastoral work is part of their religious calling. And through the discourse with these books, I have to ask myself, if I read an hour of Christian couples books each day for the next 7 years, will I be an expert in pastoral work? Just kidding. That's just snark for the heck of snark. But I've come to recognize that there seems to be this concept in the evangelical sphere that the act of interacting with their scripture, their religious works, is in itself a morally good act. And that if you would like to become morally good, you need to have an active discourse with the literature of the religion. And if you're operating with that perspective that the best way to better yourself and be a better member of your religion is by having a close discourse with your religious texts, that lifts and adds importance to the entire activity of reading. And then, of course, Robb Brewer is also a academic, so he has that additional tinge of bias towards reading is good because that's what academics do, and academics create written text. And if you're an academic saying that reading is unimportant, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. If Robb were to say anything other than reading is really important, he would be hitting himself from multiple directions. It makes sense for him to have a bias in favor of reading because reading is godliness, and then reading is academically important in order to be in the academics. So it makes a lot of sense that he would have this sort of bias. And none of this is to knock religious folks who place an emphasis on reading. Lots of people who aren't religious also place the same sort of importance on reading. And in my experience, they're mostly academics, which is the second part of Robb's bias. A lot of the people I know who equate reading with goodness are people who work in the field of literature, either as high school literature teachers or academics. So there's kind of this twofold approach going on to lift reading as a moral good. Okay, so a lot of you who are watching this are saying, Julie, I read that infographic. It's not really positing a moral standing on these different statements. And I hear you, so let's do a thought exercise real quick. We're going to read one of these surprising book facts and try to understand what's juicy about it. What would make somebody want to share this infographic and lead to this infographic going viral? So one of the metrics is that 57% of new books are not read to completion. We don't know what they mean by new books. Like, is that all printed new books? We don't know what read to completion means. We don't know if it's cover to cover or if it's just the content of the book itself. We can't know those things, but we can evaluate the statement on its face. It's not an incredibly exciting statement if you're reading it from an amoral perspective. It's a consumption metric about newly published books, perhaps. And if I read this statement from the stance of somebody who does not place a moral importance on books, I would say something along the lines of 57% of books that people start are boring, and they realize that it's not worth dedicating the time to finish the book because this is a leisure activity and they're not getting leisure from this activity. However, if you read this from the perspective of somebody who thinks that reading is a moral good and that you judge reading by completing a book and somebody's literacy by how many books they complete, you would see this as a failure on readers to dedicate themselves and complete what they start, which is the act of reading a book. If you judge somebody's readership by whether or not they complete books, this would upset you. I have a different personal relationship to reading. I think that you should not force yourself to read a book that you don't like, and that you can usually tell within the first 20 or so pages whether or not you're going to enjoy the activity of reading that book. And if you do not enjoy it, you should free yourself up to read something else. So to me, this statement only is exciting and only fits a message that this is a worthwhile infographic to share if you see not reading to completion as an issue. Because 57% of newly published books do not get read to completion. What? What are we printing them for? What's wrong with the literacy of the country? When in reality, it doesn't necessarily mean that. You know what? Let's compare an apple to an orange real quick. You say 57% of new books are not read to completion. I say 50% of all US marriages end in divorce. Now, if you believe that marriage has a spiritual component, that it is a religious vocation, it is a religious calling that you take on as part of your relationship to your community, to your partner, and to your God, then you may see this as a moral panic and have an emotional reaction to this figure, that 50% of all marriages ending in divorce is a failure of culture. It is a tragedy. It is very sad. I quite commonly hear the phrase, In my grandparents' time, you didn't just walk away from a broken relationship, you fixed it. But what that usually fails to acknowledge is the fact that in my grandmother's time, she could not support her children, she could not get housing, she could not have a bank account to support herself, and she had to deal with whatever lot her husband brought her through. So the marker that a woman can now pursue divorce and then not be damned to poverty is actually the marker of a progressive society that emboldens people to seek better situations for themselves, their children, and their partner. It also means that people can amicably divorce and it's not held against them. However, I understand that that's not the full context, and we can dive a little bit deeper into it, and we see that 41% of first marriages end in divorce, whilst 60% of second marriages and 73% of third marriages. So it appears as though that 50% number is mostly serial divorcees. And honestly, I don't really have a moral reaction or an emotional reaction to this figure because it really lacks the nuance and context of people escaping abusive situations, or not necessarily escaping abusive situations, but finding independence and a better life for themselves. If a person has a relationship with the concept of marriage that equates it to moral goodness, they will see this 50% number as a moral panic and something to grieve and hold culture accountable for, whilst if somebody sees it as an indicator that the culture is progressive and allows people to seek independence after a negative situation, then they may see it as a positive number. Of course, that's all not to say that anybody is reading 57% of new books are not read to completion. Great, cool. I'm not saying that it's going to be interpreted as a positive number. I'm just saying that it doesn't need to be interpreted as a moral number. Like, you don't know, maybe that number is evaluating all published books, and maybe 20 of that 57% is because they're not sold and they go to a landfill, or they go to a library and never get checked out. It's unclear what we're supposed to take away from this based off of the numbers alone, unless you're applying a moral interpretation to the statement. Okay, Julie, this is a misinfographic. It's misleading, it's biased. We dox him, we send him death threats, we bring down his website, right? No, stop it. So, from what I can tell, Robert Brewer has done everything within his power to put what came out of Pandora's box back into it. Just unfortunately, because of the pervasive nature of digital media, it still exists online despite his recanting the statements, releasing multiple blog posts. It turns out it's less viral to explain information is inaccurate than it is to disseminate misinformation. He added a blurb to the bottom of the infographic saying this graphic may not be distributed for any purpose. However, that's only on the newer version of the infographic and not the original version that went viral in the first place. So if you search for the surprising book facts infographic, you're going to find the version that does not say do not distribute this. If you come across this infographic on your aunt's Facebook page, or your uncle, or your nephew, or on Instagram, or wherever you see it in the wild of the internet, don't be a know-it-all. Don't be rude to whoever shared it, because for some reason it resonated with them. And it resonates with a lot of people. It went viral. Instead, direct them towards Robb Brewer's blog post where he explains that it's misinformation. Or, if they love video essays, send them this video. But there's no reason to be that jerk to somebody who's just trying to share something that they're excited about that hit them right where the content hits you. In making this video, I'm already hearing some of the comments which are saying, Julie, you're acting like reading isn't objectively good. You're acting like reading isn't a tool to self-learn, as though it isn't the best way to entertain yourself or expand your knowledge and understanding of the world. And to that I say, why do you feel that way? Why do you feel that it is objectively the best way to do those things? Because I don't believe it is that objective. I believe that it is an opinion and that there are certain types of brain configurations, or, you can describe it even as like neurotypical versus different types of neural environments that lend themselves to enjoying reading more. And it's possible that people who enjoy things assign a moral value to that thing that they enjoy. For instance, I like to run, but I don't think it is a morally good activity. There are people I know who like to lift, and I would be annoyed if they're like, Julie, this is the best exercise. Why aren't you doing this exercise? I find a lot of enjoyment in reading, but at the same time, I'm reading nonfiction like this. I'm reading fiction. I'm reading all kinds of things. I'm reading dieting books. I'm reading things that I plainly disagree with. I'm reading things because I want to understand how other people think. And for me, reading is a good way to do that because I'm not as interested in doing the social interactions of directly interfacing with people. So for me, it's a lot easier to read. And also, I'm a fast reader, and I have that acumen for self-learning through reading. Like, my brain just kind of maps to the concept of reading. And it's wrong for me to assign an objective judgment to that because I know that there are other types of brains that work better from directly interacting with people, or for instance, through working out systems and games, or through physically doing activities. And I don't think necessarily that one of those things is better than the other. They suit different types of people. And for me, reading suits me. But like I said, I don't think that me enjoying running makes running a morally good activity. I don't think that me enjoying reading or writing or drawing or making videos makes those activities in and of themselves morally good. It just makes them things that I enjoy doing, that I can derive value from and learn from. That's kind of my take. And if you disagree on that, like, I would just ask that you ask yourself why, and maybe do a little bit of an exercise on challenging yourself to see it as less of a morally good activity, because not all reading is the same, right? I don't think you could say that an hour a day of reading romance novels is the same as reading an hour a day of textbooks, nor do I think you could say that both of those activities are better than watching something or attending a conference where you interact with people. There's just different things that different people enjoy. Don't get the impression that I'm just lecturing you. I'm also lecturing me. It's really easy to judge other people's interests, like, oh, I can't believe they like that thing. I get upset when people are like, Julie, I can't believe you like The Bachelor. You read books. Girl, what kind of books am I reading? Just reading books. Yeah, like, I read textbooks for fun, but I also read, like, Cersei. I also read, like, fantasy fiction. Like, it just, you gotta let people like things, and don't judge people based off of what they like, unless what they like is hurting other people. Then maybe judge it. I don't know. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This, like, absolutely drives me crazy. It's one of those things that's just like, I can't let go of it when I see it. Every time that this infographic comes across my way, I'm just like, how are people still sharing this? How did they not know my sacred knowledge? So this is one of those times that I am sharing with you the thing that makes my brain just go crazy. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, go ahead and like it, comment, share it if you see it fit to do so. I appreciate you guys for all your support on my virtual pet content and my non-virtual pet content, because I think this is along those lines. It's something that exists on the internet. It's worth talking about. Thanks. Bye.